And now we have the privilege of welcoming to the stage Jane Hill of the BBC. Jane is a TV news presenter who has anchored many stories for the TV news, including the tour of Canada by the newlywed Duke and Duchess of Cambridge, the election of US President Barack Obama, Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and the September 11th attacks. In 2010, she made a documentary for Radio 4 entitled Glad to Be Gray about issues facing older members of LGBT community. Please welcome Jane Hill.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Fantastic welcome. Slightly precarious sitting up here. I'll try to manage to stay on this for the next 40 minutes. Got slightly alarmed when I walked in and saw this. And it's really funny standing backstage because the sound is very slightly distorted from our speakers. So I don't really know what they just said about me. So was it bad? I don't know. I'm sorry. I take no responsibility. I am now have great pleasure in introducing the rest of our panel here for the next 40 minutes for our lunchtime discussion. Some who may be familiar to you, some not, but we're in for a great debate, I hope. So if I can introduce onto the stage, first of all, John Licence from Marriott International. John's been with Marriott since 1984 and fairly recently moved back to the UK after having a terrible 3 years living in Florida. It must have been awful.
It was right on the beach.
I've heard terrible stories. Sitting next to John, we are going to have Judy DeLugach from Olivia Travel.
Wow.
Judy, the president and founder of that travel company, which, for anyone who's not entirely sure of Olivia, is the largest company, I think, in the world, Judy, that offers specifically travel services for the lesbian community. And Judy has some great stories. I'm looking forward to hearing all of those. Sitting next to Judy, we're going to have Nikki Gilmore. Nikki is the CEO of Evolved Employer, which publishes the Glass Hammer, which some of you may be familiar with. An Evolved Employer is the workplace consulting arm of her story, and Nikki has fantastic stories and an extraordinary analysis of organizational culture. And I described a few things at the BBC to her over lunch. I don't think we came out of it very well. But Nikki is here to analyze what we are all doing right and I think perhaps doing wrong in terms of how we manage our businesses. And finally, Sharon Fraser from Deloitte is the last member of our panel. Sharon. Sharon is the managing partner for regional markets and is responsible for services in 17 offices outside of London, so wide-ranging responsibilities reflected by all four of the fantastic members of our panel. And I will kick off as we consider for the next little while how businesses, organizations can and perhaps should have a positive impact on the LGBT community in the areas where they operate. I'm going to start with a sort of broad brush question, in particular, I think, to John and to Sharon, working for companies that spread all over the globe. Just to give us a sense, give the audience a sense, John, perhaps I'll start with you. Just give us a reminder of the range of Marriott. It's huge, of course, the geographical area that you're spread across, and some of the facilities and the programs that you have in place, particularly for your LGBT staff, first of all. We'll talk about clients and customers as well, of course, but we'll start with your workforce.
Okay. Firstly, I'd like to say, this is a great hotel and they're doing a great job. But next time, I hope you're in a Marriott hotel as well, because we love to support these type of functions as well. But yeah, absolutely. We operate in 72 countries. We've got 3,700 hotels and about 300,000 employees around the world. Absolutely, inclusion and diversity has been something that has been key to Marriott's culture forever. Bill Marriott says, look after the people and they'll look after the customers. And that's how we work. That's how all of our leadership work. It's a very, very good, inclusive leadership. If I look at some of the things that we've done, 10 years ago, we introduced same-sex benefits for all our associates in the US. Also in any other country where we could actually bring that in. We have a dedicated supplier diversity program of which LGBT, I knew they ought to get this right. LGBT companies are absolutely listed. And we actually, I think you've lost me. We also have our own networking group called One, which works within globally. And also from a customer point of view, we have a Marriott.com, we have a dedicated LGBT site on Marriott.com, very popular, and obviously to work with those communities.
And I never knew that before today, so I'm going to go home and look at that on the website. Sharon, with Deloitte, again, a big global organization, you'll have to explain a wee bit, because I know each company in each, well, you can explain better than me, clearly. It's a slightly different setup depending which part of the world you're talking about.
Okay, and I'll come to that. So Deloitte is one of the largest professional services firms in the world. We've got about 185,000 people in over 140 countries. I guess, people, all we have are people. We don't have lots of nice hotels. So, looking after them is absolutely fundamental. And one of my favorite quotes was the chief executive of our South African firm said, when we go home at night, we should reflect on what we've done today that will make our people come back tomorrow. It's one of my, favorite quotes, and you sort of think, diversity and inclusion is an absolute business imperative for us. And in my role a few years ago when I was managing partner for talent, I set up our networks in the UK. And that was really driven by the LGBT agenda, because a group came to me and said, we're not sure that it's okay to be gay at Deloitte. And I was like, well, of course it is. We want all of our people to be themselves, no matter what their background is. And just hearing it from them and hearing some of the stories, I thought we absolutely have to change. And we have to put these networks in place so that everyone can see very clearly that we are absolutely, open to different religions, ethnicity, gender and sexual orientation. So I put those in place. And then you sort of obviously link into what's happening around the world. And my point earlier to you was that although we're a global firm, we're a network of firms. And so within each country, each of the firms is completely independent. And so in the US and Canada and the UK, we have very strong LGBT networks that work very closely together. And we've got sort of smaller fledgling networks around the world, but there are a number of countries where, we obviously don't have any of those networks, and that's something we'll obviously come to later.
Yeah, so in certain areas there is a challenge, but for sure, and we'll touch on some of that. Judy, so interesting it's going to be to hear your perspective, because by definition, you're out there. You are an LGBT company, and you do great things for the female community in particular. What can you talk to this point? Because your very ethos is about supporting that community. So you're coming at it from a whole different perspective.
Right. Well, first I want to say I think this is a great hotel, but I think the next time it should be on a cruise, don't you? Okay. Fabulous cruise. We do come from a different place, because what we do is we are bringing the assumption of LGBT to the countries that we go to the companies that we deal with, and we help to change the cultures of the actual companies that we've been dealing with over the last, Olivia started 40 years ago, the travel part as a record company. We became a travel company about 20 years ago. We do about 150,000 lesbians have traveled with us over the world, and we've done about 160 trips. So we've been out there for a long time, and when we started, we were, no one wanted to charter cruise ships to us. They were afraid the right wing would be against us, and then now we're the largest chartering company for Holland America. So we have a whole different experience, because we've been out there spending the money with these companies who then had to change their whole viewpoint of our community and also about their own internal structure, because we were so out and the people on the cruises were so out. Their staff was so in the closet, and so they had to really readjust how they treated their staff. And so now there's a whole different attitude on board, whereas when we first came, the cruise line, everyone would tell us they were gay quietly, but now they're completely open and out. And an example is Holland America has basically said to us, you've made a tremendous difference to our culture, because we've been there for so long and we've been really working with them for so long to make that change. So going to different countries, being good citizens in those countries, being lesbians who spend money in those countries, changes the way people see this community. And we've destroyed the concept that lesbians don't tip. That is, we have, single-handedly. But we've also affected cultures all over the world. And I'll get into that more a little later, but it just gives you the idea that we have an understanding of a different perspective from how we can make a difference through economic clout of all the companies that are here. The economic clout makes all the difference in changing people's attitudes.
It's all about the money, isn't it? It always comes down to that. And just to clarify, I mean, when you're chartering a ship, for example, Judy, you're getting the vessel and its crew, is that right? I mean, there's nothing to say that every single member of staff on that ship is, you have straight people, gay people, everything in between. I mean,
Right, I mean, the staff is overwhelmingly men, and well, I wouldn't say overwhelmingly, but a lot of them are gay. Some of them, and culturally, there's a lot of differences. There are 47 countries often that are represented amongst the staff. But now, people who are gay are out and freely say that they're gay, which is a very different thing. And how America now has changed all of their policies around being gay on their trips. So all that is very, very different than when we first started.
And John, you touched on suppliers and that sort of thing. Is there is this a genuine business decision? I mean, if you take that notion to your, is it a CEO who runs Marriott, whatever the top man's title is or the top woman's title is, and you go and you say, I think we should have X supplier or Y supplier for this reason. Is it, like Judy says, does it all come down to the money? It just makes business sense? Or is it driven by good, strong-hearted feelings about this somehow emotionally being the right thing to do as well?
I think it's driven by a bit of both, really. I think, we, as I said, our culture is very strong, and we do believe in supporting diversity, whether it's women, whether it's race or something else, but and LGBT. But it's also driven by a corporate sense of responsibility, and the fact that we want to, again, we know our workforce is a very varied workforce, and we want to work with suppliers and also have customers that are varied as well.
And Sharon, does that apply to you as well? It comes from a corporate sense of responsibility, because how does it impact on your bottom line, which is what I assume the big bosses really want to know?
Well, it was very interesting, because when I first tried to introduce the networks, it was very much, why would we do this? And obviously I was coming from it much more from well, we just have to do this, it's the right thing. And then I could see this executive, which was pretty much all white male in their 50s. And I'm thinking, this isn't going down. What is the thing? And it's all about, I mean, for us, it's our clients. So are they going to employ us if we don't look like them? And increasingly our clients are, there's more diversity. Clients are saying to you, have you got good diversity policies? We want to see all of these things. And so there's a response to that, which is very important. And public sector is, I suppose, even further ahead than a number of our corporate clients. And when our chief executive went along to a pitch for an £8 million piece of work and was asked, do you really at Deloitte think diversity is very important? We want to understand, because it was for a charity, where you are. And he absolutely got it. And he came back and he said, it isn't just about the money. Genuinely, I can see the difference this will have on our people. And I know that project was very important, but having spent time with him and talking to him, and the LGBT community went to see him and told him their stories, and then he did really get the emotional buy-in, and that, for me, was when our approach at the executive changed, and he led that. It was very important.
And that is a cultural shift within a relatively short space of time. It's not really that many years since you set up those networks.
No, absolutely.
And did you feel huge resistance at the time? Or do you look back on it now and think, my goodness, actually, we've come a jolly long way in 10 years?
We've come so far so quickly, but you start telling the stories and people do. It's partly just a lack of understanding. Because people, I met someone from our Bristol office at one of the drinks that our LGBT network had put on, and he said, I was in a particular organisation, I couldn't come out, I came to Deloitte, you had the network, I could see the sponsorship we had at a senior level, and I knew that I could come out and be comfortable, and he was the only person who's openly gay in our Bristol office. He was the first person to come out. And you hear something like that, and the hairs on the back of your neck stand up, because it's such a lovely story.
Yes. Nikki, let me bring you in at this point. Was there someone who advises companies in organisational change, how to get the best out of their company? Do you have a reflection, first of all, just in terms of the snapshots we've heard from Sharon and Judy as to where their companies are going? What resonates with you?
Well, we arranged that I'd speak last because I did want to kind of take in what you guys were saying about your culture.
Yeah,
And
she's analysing you all. No pressure.
Sorry.
No pressure. We're all getting marks out of 10 later, you know.
It's industrial psychology. So there's no therapy going on in this stage. Can I just tell you that up front? I think you mentioned the resistance, and culture is always difficult, isn't it? Because resistance is actually a good thing. Ambivalence can be a good thing, because if they didn't care, then it would be a straightforward, overt no. And so I think in all of our journeys, when we sort of see that ambivalence in our companies, it's actually a really positive opportunity to kind of jump in and then get people interested, make them aware, as you say, like some people just don't know gay people, and sort of give them the tools to sort of be a bit more aware about what it means to be gay and the gay experience at work. And then give them the skills, because, you know, as the straight ally stuff that is so popular at the moment, you know, you might say you're a straight ally, but what does that really mean? So I think we have to meet people where they're at and turn to our leadership as well and bring them along in their journeys so that we can do this cultural change that's ever so important to see this thing advance.
And leadership is hugely important. I mean, we heard that even from our friend from Disney just at the beginning, talking about one single person who sort of stood up and was supportive and backed him. And again, it just takes one person. It sounds like a cliche, doesn't it? But that's what it takes.
Absolutely.
Can sometimes.
You know, it's about the power of one. So if you can even leave this room and go back to your desks tomorrow and take one person along on the ride, you're changing the world. And I know that might be a bit of a slow process. But actually, if you start to understand what that strategic network looks like and can get other people to then go out and do the work on your behalf, because as gay people, LGBT people, and even allies, we often have to do the work on behalf of others. So let's get them working on our behalf.
And do you find that a challenge? When you go into a company and advise it, is that an area that's, I mean, you say it's almost sort of trendy at the moment. Is that a growth area, if you like, to use corporate language?
I think, you know, meet people where they're at and just take them along for the ride. And a lot of this is cognitive, but a lot of this is emotional. And you mentioned that about the sort of EQ side of things. Some people have EQ, some people don't. And so when you spot the allies, and just because you're gay doesn't mean you have EQ. You could be in complete denial about yourself as well. Can we just put that out there? So I think it's about spotting people with EQ who you can take along and help them understand what it means to be a change agent and an ally on this journey inside the corporations.
Do we all understand what EQ is?
Emotional intelligence.
Yeah, John.
No, I was just going to say, our network is called One, and I was really totally amazed at how many straight people are registered, are on it, who are participating, especially in the US. And just another point I'd like to make is, you know, when you talk about, you know, I think different parts of the world are at different sort of levels of where they are. The US is very advanced. I'd say Europe, we're just about getting the hang of it a little bit, and I think in fact, our company in Europe, I think, is pretty behind compared to what I've heard here today, but with people that want to get on with this LGBT network and make it happen. And then you've got other parts of the world where it really isn't happening at all. We've got members of our network, but there's no cohesion, there's nothing happening at the moment, and I think that's what we need. It's almost the networking session earlier, which I was in, which I ran late, and then for my briefing, you know, was talking about that, and that's really key for me, is how I'd like to learn more from some of these other companies in the room, especially in the UK, how we can improve our performance here as well.
So if we move it on and we broaden it out and we sort of take it as read that you're doing certainly the best you feel you can do for all your members of staff here, let's go back to Judy, because you, again, by definition, have extraordinary examples of, as John suggests, the parts of the world where things are trickier. By definition, you must have taken tour groups to some of those parts of the world. Tell us some of your experiences and how you feel, to go back to what you were saying earlier, it really can and has made a difference.
Okay, so first, we're 40 years old, this company. So the transition and watching the transitions have been extraordinary over the last 40 years, and I've been there. So I was 4 when we started. But there was nothing then. And then as time progressed, things have changed, and the changes have been getting faster and faster, so that's all terrific. But some great examples of how we've been able to make a difference is, you know, Grand Cayman, which was a British protectorate, wouldn't let us in for many, many years as gay people. And we had to meet with the government and talk to them, and then ultimately talk to the British government, who then forced the issue because there were gay rights in England, but they were not fulfilling that in Grand Cayman. So we had this whole lengthy process, but what actually made the difference was us going there. And once we went there, they saw that we were, great citizens, and did what every other tourist did, which was spend money again. So that was one way that we reopened Grand Cayman. The other thing that happened in the Bahamas, there was a big event where all of the bishops of the area had, and the Caribbean is many places are very homophobic, but we've been going there for almost 20 years, and so certain pockets have changed their whole attitudes towards us because we come over and over and over again, and they see us. So it has made a real difference. But in the Bahamas, there was a protest, and the Bahamian government was supposed to protect us as we came into town, and all the archbishops had a meeting to discuss the fact that homophobia, being gay was an abomination. And so they met a week before we arrived in Nassau, and so they organized they somehow found out we were coming. We don't announce it or something, but on the internet they found us, and so they organized a protest. The government was supposed to protect us. They didn't, so they came onto the pier, and they started singing these hymns, and it was the day after Easter. And they were singing these beautiful four-part harmony hymns. Well, they failed to recognize that the women on board also knew the hymns. So as they were singing down below, we were singing on board. And it took all of the negativity out. They stopped singing once they finished and walked away. So after that, we met with the head of tourism for the Bahamas, and he said, "We're so sorry." And then we said, "No, that's not enough. You have to have the Prime Minister has to have a press conference and announce his apology, and also do you want gay people to come here? Well, then he better say something about that." And so he did. And a week later, he did this whole proclamation that everyone was welcome and that gay people, and he talked about his brother being gay, and so it changed for a moment what was happening in the Bahamas. Now, again, it's not perfect in the Bahamas, but we made that level of difference. So that's just one of many, 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 many stories.
That is a fantastic
Going to China,
example.
going to Russia, going to all these places where even being visible is almost non-existent. So I'm not saying that it's non-existent in Russia, but now there are policies in St. Petersburg, for example, where it's illegal to come together. It's not even clear what the law is, but basically they said that if you come together, you cannot be very out because you might affect children, and so they have arrested a few people. So we just arrived there 2 weeks ago, right after this law started. So things like that happen all the time for us.
And that is a fantastic example. And I wonder, maybe Sharon or John, whether you can think of similar examples, maybe not that obvious, but are there instances where you feel your role in whatever country has empowered the LGBT community within that country?
I think, obviously we operate in a lot of countries where it's not possible to be openly gay.
Sure.
And sometimes even worse. And I think social networks have played a fantastic role. So, our UK and US and Canadian networks in particular are very good at getting lots of information out all of the time that people can link into. And we've had approaches from employees in some of these countries to our networks, getting more information, becoming part of our network, and linking in on Facebook. They do it personally through personal emails. And we've had, the example of someone who we've arranged for them to transfer to America. So we've helped them get their visa. They're moving to America. And then someone else who is transgender and wanted to have the operation. They were based in Dubai, wasn't a possibility. They transferred to the UK firm. They've had the operation, and they basically said that would not have been possible without the network that was set up in the UK. And we also have, in Japan, for example, we've got a team there who are working with our UK team because they want to set up a network in Japan and are sort of getting help from us and the Americans on the best way to go about it. So there's lots of ways we are helping sort of the rest of the world.
And John Marriott is such an enormous company by definition. You operate in countries where...
Yeah, I was going to say,
even if we're in countries where they don't recognize LGBT people, we still have hotels there and we'll still welcome those people. Those hotels will be on the website, the gay website. So, you know, we will try to help the people in those countries. And we've had a few issues as well where we've had to move people because of situations, and we'll obviously do that. But we will hire gay people in countries where it is a challenge for them to live their life freely, and work with them to try and help them as best they can.
And I'm aware that we're already running out of time. I can't believe it. We can talk, can't we? But maybe we should throw it out in terms of the challenges for the future. We've heard a lot of fascinating stories, and much of it positive, which is great, but there's always plenty to do. What are the challenges for the future? I appreciate this is quite a big question, but who might like to kick off with your thoughts going forward?
You know, I think that every company is different, and so one of the pitfalls, and I think LGBT is the last bastion of diversity because we're the invisible minority, so you can identify people with their race and their gender fairly quickly. And then, in fact, last week we had a conference where Jane, you were part of, where we explored managing multiple identities. So I really think that I can't answer that question with one sentence. It's about really understanding the context in which you're working on, whether it's your own company or even your wider societal surroundings, and really just sort of looking at where the individual needs and values are most prevalent, and go to those people and try and understand how to connect the top-down stuff, the systemic stuff, with kind of empowering the people as you go. So I feel like the future isn't the ERGs or the talent this or the mentor program. I really feel like that is a false piece of advice. I think it's about understanding your people's needs and serving your constituency, whether it's your employee base or your customer base.
Judy, where do you see your next big frontier, your next big
Well,
challenge?
you know, it's
as Olivia?
interesting because people often say, well, what are you going to do now that we're getting our rights? And first of all, I'm not terribly worried about it because I go on vacation myself, and I go to straight vacations, and I think I have job security for a long time to come. So we're better, that's all. I don't know what to say. It's more fun. I don't, you know, why would we bother to, you know, just become one? So that's one thing that I just want to say. And the other thing is, you know, just because we do get our rights, it doesn't mean that homophobia, internalized or external, is gone. And so we have to keep that in mind. So I was talking to some folks about, well, why should we still work or be together or have groups that are lesbian, gay, LGBT when we have our rights? Well, it doesn't disappear. The culture doesn't shift necessarily as quickly as the laws may. And so we need to be, and particularly for people in general, to really understand that both gay and straight, that things don't just change overnight.
That begs so many questions. There is so much more to discuss. I'm told we don't have any longer. I hope perhaps you might be able to continue that debate amongst yourselves, and do enjoy the rest of the conference. But please thank an excellent panel, Sharon and Nikki and Judy and John. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
So our sincere thanks to Jane Hill and all of our other panelists. Surely the influences of all of your business endeavors have been felt far and wide in the LGBT community, and we all have a great deal of gratitude to offer all of you. Let's give them one more round of applause. And once again, thanks to Deutsche Bank for sponsoring today's luncheon. So I have some very important late-breaking news to share with you. This very night at 22:15, Europe's tallest building, the Shard, will hold its official grand opening with a magnificent laser light show which will be visible throughout London. We know you won't want to miss this. And so now, as we prepare for this afternoon's series of breakout and learning sessions, I have the privilege of introducing Teresa McHenry, HR Director for Microsoft, which is graciously sponsoring this afternoon's workshop sessions. Please join me in thanking Microsoft and welcoming Teresa McHenry to the stage.